What is happening, my good people? Here I am after a few minutes. Sorry for the delay. I had some technical difficulties. I'm trying to utilize a camera here, not the webcam on my laptop. So therefore, with my Sony cam that I really wanted to use, high-end, some clear capability to broadcast to everybody out there. And for whatever the reason, I was unable to get it connected here into this hub, and it wasn't coming up. So I had to use another backup webcam. And it's still pretty good. Hopefully you see me and you can hear me loud and clear. I'm off mute, so it's not as if I'm talking to myself here or you're just watching me move my lips and you can't hear. But for those, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. And thank you so much for your patience, waiting a few minutes here as I try to get everything organized and everything set to get this live stream underway. So once again, my sincerest apologies for, hey, John, I appreciate you jumping on board. Yes. All right, Sleepy Stern's going to fix the starting pitchers problem. I'm going to get to your questions. I'm going to get to whomever's going to jump on board. I appreciate it. And once again, thank you so much for your patience and understanding for the late start. Whomever's going to be in the chat room, John, don't worry. I'm going to get you in a second. We're going to talk about Sleepy Sterns. And yes, we'll get into the Mets as well. But there's a couple of housekeeping notes. And here, as you see at the bottom there, details for the 7th anniversary podcast, which is going to take place on Saturday. 7 years. I can't believe how fast it's gone. And I'm going to have some guests to jump on board. I actually have 2 confirmed. I'm having another one. Hopefully, I'll get that confirmed within the next day or so. I mean, obviously, it's going to have to happen between now and Saturday. So time is running out. But obviously, I still have a few moments in order to secure that 3rd guest. But for right now, I will get into the scenario regarding the live stream, which will take place there on Saturday. And right at this very moment, I have a time frame. It is going to be between 12 noon Eastern and 7 p.m. Now, the reason why I say 12 to 7 is because I have not been able to secure a spot for this live stream at this very moment. Number one, of course, I could broadcast right here from the comforts of my own home, but I don't want to hijack 3, 4, 5, 6, possibly 7 hours with the wife and the puppy just for them to steer clear as I babble away and we interact back and forth with what's going on here, not only, of course, with the podcast, but also to talk about what's happening in sports, get the guests involved, etc. So in order to secure that spot, which has not been official at this very moment, and of course, I will have that done between now and, let's say, midnight Saturday, but I actually may come back with another live stream. You're going to have to stay tuned, which I may do even Friday night, early evening, nothing late, just so you get a better sense, an idea, and I'll post it all over my socials, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. But because I do not have a spot as of right this very moment, and you have to understand, people, there have been a couple of places I've contacted and that they're willing to work with me, but I have to get a particular part, whether it's not to say I'm going to get sectioned or roped off, but I don't want to have people in the background. I don't want to have people waving. And of course, if it's going to be loud, and even though I have the microphone in front of me, it's not going to be a scenario where I don't want the crowd to overpower the audio on my end, number one. And then number two, which is even more important, that a lot of these establishments are going to play music overhead. Not that they're going to have DJ or anything like that, but let's say, for instance, if there's a particular sports bar that I want to go to and have people come out and people be a part of this anniversary, chances are there's going to be some just ambiance. I'm not going to say mood music, but music in the background for just to set the scene. And listen, I'm just a little podcast host here. I cannot control what an establishment's going to do. Yes, I can tell them that, hey, can we turn down the music? But if it's going to be heard in the background, and of course it's not copyrighted, there is a possibility that the live stream could get shut down. And that's the last thing that I want. So therefore, I don't live in a big space. I wish I had a 3-bedroom apartment where I had my own studio where I could just go in, close, lock the door, and away we go. But unfortunately, that's not the case. That's why I've been looking at other places and other avenues to host this podcast or host this live stream. So therefore, I could be in the comforts, in my comfort zone, to interact with you guys and gals, to not only discuss about the origins of this podcast, to celebrate the podcast, to celebrate you. Because without you guys and gals, there is no me. Let's just call it as we see it. So for those who are going to hop on board Saturday, again, the window is going to be between 12 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. It will be confirmed as late as Friday afternoon, and I would think in the early evening on Friday, I'll come out with another live stream, or maybe I'll just post it, but that's where you have to stay tuned. And I'll put it here on my YouTube channel for those who do follow me and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and I appreciate you guys and gals that do subscribe. So that's what we have with the podcast. I'm going to have guests. I'm going to have a couple of giveaways, which will be fun. And the guests, like I had maybe mentioned a couple of days ago on my podcast, which, of course, Apple, Spotify, and here on YouTube, I do have 2 confirmed. I'm looking to get a third. And the third one is one that's near and dear to my heart. So I hope that I could get him to hop on board just at any point, even if it's just for 10 minutes, just to have him be a part of the live stream. And obviously it's big to me because if you've listened to the podcast, if you've watched it here over the last year or so, considering that I've been doing this full time and I've been able to put up a video podcast as well as the audio, as you know, he is a huge part of not only just my journey in becoming a podcast host and also a content creator, but he is certainly instrumental and a big part of what it is that I've done. And this goes back many years. So if he's able to hop on board, that'd be fantastic. And obviously we could share some stories and have a lot of fun talking about sports and some of the teams that he roots for. I think I have something in my eye here. But for the guest to confirm, the third one, waiting to hear back from. And I can't wait to launch it. I can't wait to get it started. I can't wait to get it rolling. So therefore, that is your details for the podcast and for the live stream there. Saturday, March 1st, 12 p.m. Eastern to 7 p.m. That's the window, but I will confirm it one more time there at some point Friday, even Friday early evening. I'll hop on board, maybe even take some more questions and interact with you guys and gals. And let me see. Let's start there. I know, Jonathan, let's go to your first comment. And you have Sleepy Stern's not going to fix the starting pitchers problem. I know you also had another thing too, which I'll throw in there. I'm not in love with the starting rotation. I'm sorry and this is the Mets. Diehard Met fan, as you know, when you look at the JAYREELZ podcast, the colors are blue and orange. So you already know for the state of New York and, of course, for the Mets and my beloved Islanders, who right now are teetering here. They lost to the Rangers last night badly, 5-1. But I'm not in love with the rotation. And if there is going to be an Achilles heel of this team right now, and we can even say the bullpen to a certain extent, but at least the bullpen, as of right this moment, I know you got Edwin Diaz, and I'll get to the bullpen in a second. Let me start with the rotation just to go by what Jonathan had mentioned here. Kodai Senga, if he stays healthy, and that's a huge if, considering what happened last year. You like Senga if he's going to be your ace. Sean Manaea, as we already know, he's already dealing with an injury bug now, even though it is questionable whether or not he's going to start the season in the rotation or start the season as far as being one of the first 5. You'd think he'd probably be number 2 right now. I'm not in love with Clay Holmes, despite the fact that he pitched well in his debut there during spring training. I believe it was against if I'm not mistaken, I guess it was against the Nationals a couple days ago. But for those guys, David Peterson, I mean, this is a rotation that, I'm sorry, nobody's going to be shaking in their boots if you're an opposing team in a 3-game series to where you're going to think, all right, maybe Kodai Senga, all right, you're going to have to certainly watch for him and that ghost forkball that he has. But yes, this is certainly a far cry from the Matt Harvey, Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Steven Matz that went to a World Series in 2015. And not to say that those guys were world beaters, although Harvey did have that, do I even need to go back into the history books, that Game 5 where he went into the 9th inning up 2-0. Really, was it 1-0 in that game? And then, of course, they lost in extras. It was actually 2-0. How could I forget that? But for the rotation, I'm not in love with it. And I get it. They're probably going to end up being one of the 6 best teams in the National League to qualify for a postseason. And we all know throughout the course of the season, I'm sure they're going to be reading the tea leaves. I see Jonathan put up another quote there, which I'll put in the room here on screen in just a minute. But for the situation regarding this rotation, I'm not in love with it. I'm not. They're going to mash, you would think, with their offense and their bullpen, and we could discuss that a little bit here too. We know Diaz, who had been up and down, hot and cold, and a guy that can you really rely on in a huge spot. And we saw there, now think about it, 3 years ago? Was it 3 years that he had that killer season and the Timmy Trumpets and all that? Because remember, 2023 he was out the whole year, and then obviously pitched last year, and he was good, but he wasn't the Diaz that he was in 22 when the Mets went to the postseason and they won 101 games. But all I could say is this. If you're the Mets and if you're Sleepy Stearns, as Jonathan called it, and if you're Steve Cohen, I'm not going to say this is a boom or bust year, but considering you bring in Juan Soto and you bring back Pete Alonso, and that was huge, but this is a team that's going to have to go even further than an LCS appearance that they did last year where they lost the 6 games to the Dodgers. I mean, that's all there is to it. And we know the Dodgers are stacked. There's no need to even get into how big they are as far as looking to be a favorite to repeat in baseball. And then we know about the Phillies and them winning a division. The Braves you can't sleep on, as the Braves are perennial team that's going to make it into the postseason or be a threat there in the NL East. So I can't sit here to say that with the way the team is constructed, yes, you're going to believe they're going to be one of the 6 teams. Absolutely. But as far as them being a World Series threat or a World Series contender, I don't think you could say that right now. Yes, they're going to make it to the playoffs. Yes, they may win a wild card round. Yes, they can win a division series, as we saw last year. But anything further than that, can they beat the Dodgers? I guess they can. But would you confidently say right now, if you're going to stack your team, and especially your pitching staff and even your bullpen for that matter, because the bullpen, as we know, the Dodgers, they have had reinforcement after reinforcement after reinforcement, not only just in a rotation, but as well as the bullpen. And for the Mets, yeah, you do have Edwin Diaz, but AJ Minter, they got a lefty to come out of the bullpen, thank goodness. And Minter has had good years, as we know, in Atlanta. But is he going to be automatic, a guy that you're going to plug in there in an 8th inning and he's going to shut down the opposition just like that? Now, I have confidence in him, don't get me wrong, but still, this is a team that, in my eyes, playoff team, yes. Can they compete for a World Series? They still need more in that rotation and maybe another arm in the bullpen in order for me to really believe that this team has a shot to go all the way and finally snap what's now going to be, think about this, people, 39 years since they last won a World Series. I was 17 years old. That's all you need to know. Case closed. So you got that. Now, let me get to my next comment here. Val B, I'm going to get to you. That's basketball. But Jonathan also mentioned here that Sleepy Stearns' Port St. Lucie office clearly ain't using it. Well, I know that Stearns, to me, this has more been in a situation, especially with the Soto signing, that was more Steve Cohen than it was David Stearns. I understand he was part of these negotiations. You can't totally dismiss him. But we know that was all Steve Cohen. As far as all the other signings, whether it's Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, I could have told you about Frankie Montas. And I talked about that on the podcast once we signed him. And Jonathan, I'm sure you can attest. And Donavis, I'll get to your question there in a minute. But, I mean, think about this. You had a guy in Walker Buehler who I understand has his own laundry list of injuries that he's had to overcome. 2 Tommy Johns. He's had leg injuries, etc., especially when he came back from Tommy John as a member of the Dodgers last year. But we saw what he did in Game 3 against the Mets in an NLCS. And I get it that it was 4 innings. He threw 90 pitches, but he gutted out those 4 innings. And, right, does that all of a sudden make him be an automatic lock? No, but he does have guts. And then you saw what he did in the World Series, winning a Game 3 in Yankee Stadium. And then on 2 days rest, coming to close out the World Series, 1-2-3 fashion, for the Dodgers to finally win in 162-game regular season, full season World Series, not including the 2020 pandemic win. That was your guy, Met fans. And to think, the Red Sox signed him 1 year, $21 million, and between Frankie Montas at 17 and Griffin Canning, Griffin Canning, a guy who was 25 and 34 a lifetime with an ERA about 4.75, and to total $21 million, you could have given that to Walker Buehler. And you could have penciled him in as a third starter and a guy that has experience, knows his way around the postseason, and knows his way around winning. Didn't that make more sense there, David Stearns? I guess not. They looked at it, Frankie Montas. He has potential. Yes, he throws mid-90s. He has good off-speed stuff. But have we seen him in a Yankee uniform where he barely made any of his starts? Or, yes, I understand he went to Cincinnati and was part of the stretch there with Milwaukee, but he also fell apart there and his body betrayed him. And look, now we're not going to see him. He's not going to throw a ball for about another month at least, and who knows when he's going to come back into the rotation. So, to me, that was a bad job by David Stearns. And that wasn't second-guessing. That was me at the time when he signed Montas and knowing that I wanted Walker Buehler as a fan. But again, that's already old news. We're going to have to wait for Montas to come back. Thankfully, he has an opt-out after this year. And who knows? I don't know if that's a player opt-out. That should be more of a team thing, because how could you give Frankie Montas the option as a player to be able to say, well, you know what? I was hurt all year. I'm going to come back again for $17 million. For that, they just could have brought back Jose Quintana. And he's still out there, I might add, which who knows? The Mets may revisit and bring him back. And you know what? I'm all for it, because as you all know, you can never have enough pitching here in 2025 or even in years past. So let's see what the Mets are going to do here. I think they need some reinforcements, and they have a guy in Quintana who I'm sure wants to come back. All right, maybe for the right price, but who knows? As you get deeper into spring training, and then March is just a few days away, he may come back on a sweetheart deal. He was making 12 and a half, I believe, when he signed his deal 2 years ago. So bring him back for that same 12 and a half. Why not? That's what I would do if I was David Stearns, but I guess we'll have to wait and see with that. Now, I know Jonathan also makes a mention here. I would trade Marte for Jordan Montgomery. Now, that sounds great. And Montgomery, who has won and knows his way around New York, as we know, and won with the Texas Rangers a couple years back. Now, the thing is that Marte does have one more year. I guess he's getting paid $18 million and Montgomery $25. So I'm sure that the Diamondbacks, I don't know if they want to send cash back in this regard, because think about this. They would have to probably offset that if the Mets were to make that deal. Now, Marte, obviously, he's a guy that had played in Arizona, and I don't know where he's going to fit in. He's not going to play right field because Corbin Carroll's out there. But Marte, although when he's healthy, he's a good guy to have in your lineup. And although another one that he's just a sneeze away from tearing an oblique and being on the IL for about a month, but that's not a bad thought. Why not bring in Montgomery? I like that. I think Montgomery does have, another year on his contract. I think he signed a 2-year deal. I don't know if it was a 3-year deal, 2 with an opt-out. That I have to go back and look. But Montgomery would be fine if you ask me. That brings in another lefty to go along with David Peterson. You have a little bit of balance there to go along with the righties in your rotation. So I'm with that, Jonathan. So I will definitely make do and make that trade. Now, I don't know if Arizona would do that, though, because, again, they're going to have to bring back Marte and have to probably eat some of the money to offset Montgomery's contract, so the Mets would be able to even that trade out. But I don't know if the Diamondbacks would be willing to do that. And Marte, we understand he's older. What is he, 36 years old? You're probably going to have to put him in left field. And right now, the left fielder for your Arizona Diamondbacks, off the top of my head, it's not it's eluding me at this moment. But listen, if they could get anybody here, and I guess Quintana would probably be the guy, considering he's a free agent. You don't have to trade anybody for him. And yes, Marte, he's pretty much going to be a platoon player. Not that he's going to platoon with Juan Soto, but on the days where Soto's going to DH, that's where you're going to put Marte out in right field. And it's just a shame. And I see what you posted there, and I'll actually skip to that now before I get to Val's comment and the novice. So for Jonathan making 20, all right, well, you know what? That will work. Now, the thing is, Jonathan, is it going to be a situation where the Diamondbacks are going to want to take that? Because I don't know if they're going to want to have an aging Marte, who, as we all know, is injury prone. And Montgomery is a guy that is expendable at this point, because obviously with them making their deals here in this offseason where they bring in Corbin Burns, they already have the likes of Merrill Kelly as well as Zach Gallen, and they also brought in another pitcher last year on top of that, who's eluding me at this very moment, because it's not as if I'm concentrating on Arizona Diamondback baseball, and I'm sure you'll probably pop that up here in a second, who that other starter is. But they do. Brandon Pfaadt is another guy who's also had minimal success, but a guy who could be a good number 4 starter on your team. So, yeah, I don't know if the Diamondbacks would do that. But listen, in some way, shape, or form, if you're David Stearns, pick up the phone and see what they could do if they want to bring in a guy like Montgomery just for that 1 year, 20-something million. But if it's a thing where they want to be a little bit more flexible, especially when it comes to the trade deadline, to just, let's say, sign Quintana, and then if they have to make a trade then to bring back a guy that's a rental or a guy that has a year and a half left that's going to be making X amount of money, maybe they don't want to put all their chips in the basket of Jordan Montgomery, considering 22 and a half this year. Who knows? But that certainly is a good thought there to try to bring in a guy that you know is an innings eater. We all know he's serviceable, knows his way around New York, obviously pitching with the Yankees for the first part of his career, and away we go. And yes, there's the other guy that you mentioned here. I'll pop that up real quick. And that is Eduardo Rodriguez. So with him, Burns, Gallen, Kelly, I mean, and look, to think that Montgomery is a guy that could be on the outside looking in, maybe you push Fott out only because Montgomery's a guy that does have a resume, that does have a little bit more breadth in his career than Fott does, but still, he's a guy that if the Mets would be interested in, I'm sure that they could try to do what they can, whether it is Marte or even somebody else for that matter. Maybe even you want to say, dare I even say Jeff McNeil? He's a guy that you could also throw in there. Now, they're not going to put both in a trade to bring back Montgomery because maybe that's a little bit too much, but McNeil's another guy that's expendable, especially when you have the likes of Luis Angel Acuna and Ronnie Mauricio, guys who could play second base right now because the way the infield is constituted, first base is set, shortstop is set, and third base is set. And who knows, maybe even Brett Bay is a guy that could be expendable considering how his spring and what he's going to do here to showcase himself. But with McNeil, and we've seen him now, I'm not going to say he's not the same hitter that he was a couple of years ago when he won a batting title, but he has not been that same guy for whatever the reason. So he's also another guy that the Mets could dangle to bring back a pitcher. So we have to keep that in mind here as the spring or spring training moves along. Now, let me also throw in something that the novice said. They can beat the Dodgers. I don't know if they can. And listen, they didn't beat them last year. Now, they did take them back to LA to play a game 6, but I mean, think about this. Even though that was a 6-game series, the pitching was awful. The Mets gave up at least 10 runs in 3 of the games that they lost. And not only that, but they walked the ballpark. Then they give up 40-something walks in the 6 games. I mean, that is a number that is, I believe, record-setting for a championship series. So even if the Mets cut that in half, as far as the runs and the walks, you're still giving up 20-some-odd walks. You're still giving up, in essence, 5 runs a game, and that's a lot. You want to kind of keep it to 3 to 4 tops. So if you're going to give up 5 runs a game, and let me see, if I go through the wins there, Dodgers won 8-0 game 1. They lost game 2. Then they scored 10 runs in game 3, 10 in game 4, 9 in game 4. And then they scored 10 in game, or I think they scored 11 in the clincher in game 6. So, yeah, they've given up a ton of runs. So I don't think they could beat the Dodgers right now. And I don't care what happens. Now, right, we got to see what the pitching staff's going to look like, especially as we get into the season and with health and with reinforcements at the deadline, we would think. Right, we'd have to wait and see how this season's going to play out. But let's just say right now, if there was a 7-game series to be had in a championship series, Mets-Dodgers, I don't think they could beat them. And if people want to fight me off on that, please, I'm more than welcome to do that. And I'm a Met fan. I'm just being objective. I'm being honest about it. Because what makes me think that from October of last year when they lost the 6 games to now here in late February, do I think the Mets are better? I can't say they are. Especially when they've added Blake Snell to their rotation. Now you're going to have Shohei Ohtani is going to be a part of that rotation. Also, Roki Sasaki. Those are 3 guys that the Mets would dream to have. And what did the Mets do as far as any rotation help? We already just talked about it. And they may have to bring in Montgomery or somebody else. They cannot compete. There's just no way. Now, they may meet in an LCS when it's all said and done. And who knows? They could even meet in a divisional series, which may even bode well more for the Mets then than it would in the 7-game series. Because as we saw a couple of years ago with the Diamondbacks, how they just ambushed the Dodgers and sweeping them out of the postseason. Not to say that the Mets are going to do that if they were to meet up in 2025, but we've seen stranger things happen. And we could go back to that postseason 2 years ago to where the Dodgers got swept, where the Phillies beat the Braves again in the division series, winning in 4 games. And then also remember that the Texas Rangers swept the Baltimore Orioles, who won the AL East. And a lot of people thought that the Orioles could have had some legs and maybe have gotten to a World Series. So I get it's the postseason. Anything can happen, especially in a short series. But I can't say that the Mets will beat the Dodgers right now. And even though the novice came out and said this, 90 pitches in 4 innings seems like overkill. Now, right, because he was pulled after 4 innings. He had some stressful pitches, but the bottom line is that he didn't register in the decision but he gutted those innings out. In fact, in the fourth inning, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head, I know he struck out, maybe it was Francisco Lindor to close out the fourth inning. And that's what you want. You want to see guts from your starters. And I understand we live in a world now in Major League Baseball where if you go around the order a third time, or if you're already at a limit when it comes to your pitches. So as Todd Zeal, SNY, the analyst there in the pre and post game, where he comes out and said everything's about the iPad and not the eye test. And that's unfortunate. But the eye test that night in game 3, even at 90 pitches, and I understand he wasn't going to go back out there to start a fifth inning to see if he could go 100 pitches. Because remember, he is coming off Tommy John. And granted that they were looking at the big picture there in the series, knowing that the series was tied 1-1 and that they were going to need him down the road. And as it was, they didn't, because he pitched in a game 3 and you didn't see him there because he would have started in a game 7. But for him to be able to gut that out, and I believe at the time, if I'm not mistaken, the score was 4-1 because the Dodgers scored runs later on. They beat up the Met bullpen. And they had, if I'm not mistaken, they were even bases loaded in that bottom of the fourth inning. So I don't want to just discount the fact that, yes, I get it, the novice, that it was a little bit of overkill, 90 pitches, 4 innings, but he was able to gut it out. He was able to not withstand any damage by the Met offense there in order for the Mets to get back in the game and make it interesting. So I have to give Walker Buehler credit. So I get it. That is a lot of stressful pitches, and that is a lot of pitches thrown in 4 innings. But because when you look at how the game played out, you have to give him credit for gutting it out and being able to get out of jams as he had throughout the course of those first 4 innings, and including the final inning of that game, or of the game for Buehler. Now, I know the novice also put this up. The Phillies were the better team at the time. Well, I understand that. The Phillies, who won a division and obviously had a bye in the NLCS, and a lot of people thought that it was going to be a Dodger-Philly NLCS. But you also got to remember, the Mets got some magic there late in game 1, as you know, with the Zach Wheeler, who was mowing them down in the first 7 innings. And then the 8th inning, that's when they had that uprising. They scored the 5 runs. And, of course, they went ahead and won. I believe it was 6-2 the final. And then game 2, where it was back and forth, tooth and nail. The Mets had a 3-0 lead. And then, of course, they had some magic there late where you got the 2-run homer from Mark Vientos to tie the game. And then, of course, they did lose eventually 7-6. But for then to shift the scene to Flushing, and then they just took over. The Mets were able to score early and often with the home runs there by Alonso. Remember, Jesse Winker also hit the home run there early. And then even with the game at 1-0 in game 4, where Francisco Lindor hit the grand slam in the 6th, which set off Citi Field. And obviously the celebration pretty much started from that point on, even though they still had 3 more innings to go. But the Phillies were unable to hit the Met pitching there. Their timing was thrown off. And when you have guys that were Sean Manaea, and also had Jose Quintana pitch those 2 games at Citi Field, where Quintana, he's going to try to slow ball you. He's got to hit his spots, as we know, but he's going to break 90 on the gun, and he's not going to be overpowering, where Manaea, a little bit of that Sid Fernandez, for those who do remember Sid Fernandez of yesteryear, who has those drop-down motion, who, although throws 88, 90, another guy that maybe could top 92, but because of his delivery, it looks like it's 94, 95, 96, so it's very deceptive. And that's where the Philly hitters were thrown off kilter. And unfortunately, Manaea, who pitched very well in game 2, in fact, was excellent in game 2 against the Dodgers when the Mets won their game and split those first 2 games out in L.A., but in game 6, even with an extra day off, was unable to put up a carbon copy of that game, as the Dodgers, and I'm sure with their scouting reports, knew it's like, we're not falling and for any of those pitchers that are up in the zone, because Manaea likes to go up in the zone where a lot of batters will chase. So therefore, you have a situation where the Dodgers picked up on that, where the Phillies, they saw Manaea there, and I'm sure they saw him in the regular season, but in the postseason, with the series tied at 1, hostile environment, Citi Field packed, raring to go, because remember, they beat the Brewers in the wild card round, all 3 games in Milwaukee, and now this was their quote-unquote homecoming of the postseason, their first game, so you know that Citi Field was going to be jacked up, and as it was, we saw the Mets winning that game and, of course, the game 4 before they moved on. So even though the Phillies were the better team than obviously, and you're 100% correct, but we understand that doesn't mean anything when you get to the postseason, and as we saw there last year, the buzz surrounding the Mets and, of course, getting that split in Philadelphia, which was huge, winning that game 1 the way they did. And even though they had a chance to win game 2, but knowing that they had a lot of momentum going back to Citi Field, and as we saw, won those 2 games and advanced to the NLCS. And when you're better, it's just putting yourself in position. And that's what the Mets did. Oh, well, when you say when you're better, you're talking about the Phillies? Right. Well, obviously, they put themselves in good position because they had the bye. They were able to get the 5 days off to rest their rotation, to get everything lined up properly. But just like I mentioned, 2023, with how the Dodgers, Braves, and the Orioles, how they weren't able to get out of that round despite the success that they had during the regular season. And that's the one tricky thing about this playoff format, if I can get to that for a second. Now, they do need to reseed. That I believe 100%. They have to do that. But you have to wonder whether or not these teams that have the layoffs. Now, it's worked for the Astros over the years when they've had the bye. But we've seen the Dodgers falter. We've seen the Orioles. We've seen a lot of these teams. Phillies now, last year, because the other teams that had the bye, they were able to advance. So if you're the Yankees, if you're the Guardians, if obviously we've talked about the Dodgers. So last year, 3 of the 4 teams advanced who had the bye, where the year before that, 3 of the 4 teams that had the bye did not advance. So it is kind of tricky, but it's interesting because when you have that layoff, it's not like the NFL where obviously you're going to need the rest. And, of course, that's why the games are week to week. Whereas with baseball, it's all about rhythm. It's all about timing. And when you're a pitcher that, yes, you're going to have your rotation lined up, but let's just say for argument's sake that if you're Zach Wheeler, and I don't know how long the layoff was for Wheeler. I'd have to go back and look. But let's just say Wheeler, I'm sure, did not pitch that final series of the year, whomever they played against in that final weekend. So let's say his last start was the Thursday or Wednesday before his first start. That's a 9-10-day layoff. For a starting pitcher, yes, that may be great because I'm sure they could use the rest. And we saw Wheeler, what he threw, 1 hit over 7 innings, and he was fantastic. But sometimes pitchers, they could get into a rut. They could get into, a little bit off of their rhythm. And with starting pitchers being creatures of habit, they could kind of not have it, Wheeler notwithstanding, of course, to the point where you have to think about these layoffs. Now, what are they going to do? You can't condense this format. The wild card is 3 games, and that's it. And I know is what the novice just said. The layoff is long now. Now, what are you going to do? You're not going to go back to the 1-game elimination playoff. You're not going to do that. Of course, baseball is where they generate their money, and this is where they generate ratings, and they have some drama that gets built because for the team, let's just say, for instance, the Mets, when they played the Brewers, they won game 1. And now the Brewers, with them having to fight to the finish to see whether or not that they're going to win a game 2 to extend this to a 3rd game, and then obviously they did so, and we saw what happened with the dramatics of the game 3. You think baseball wants to eliminate that and go back to the 1-game elimination? Absolutely not. They're going to have the 3 games, and then you're going to have to start a division series. That's all there is to it. So, to me, I think they need to reseed first and foremost, which I understand it's another topic altogether that needs to be discussed in Major League Baseball, but you cannot have a shorter a shorter wild card scenario because you can't get any shorter than a 1-game playoff, and it can't be 2 games because obviously. So that's the one drawback of the scenario regarding teams that get the bye. Now, thankfully, last year it didn't really affect all the teams. It just affected one of them. So now we're going to have to wait and see this year to get to October to see how the teams that are and worthy enough to get the bye because they had the top 2 records in their respective leagues to benefit from having an extra 4 or 5 days off. But what do you do to combat that? There isn't anything, quite frankly. So I'll get back to some baseball people. I know my guy, Val B. I don't know if you're still in the chat. If you are or still on board, if you are, I appreciate it. And for those who are on, yes, please leave a comment. I'll post it up here. I'll talk a little basketball. Obviously, we're in the basketball in the midst of the season, and I get it. Maybe not too many people are into the NBA. I know last night you had Luka Doncic play against his former team, had a triple-double. Wasn't overly impressive shooting. He had 19 points. What do you have? 12 rebounds, and I think 10 or 11 assists. But Val B is a big Warrior fan, and they won, and they've done well here since Jimmy Butler's been a part of the team. I believe they're 6-1 now. So I don't know if anybody, Jonathan or the novice, if you're into the NBA, we could discuss that, or anything that's on your mind, of course, we could get into. But the NBA, this is what happens when you're in the middle of a long season, 82-game stretch. Same for the NHL. And props to Alexander Ovechkin last night, who got goal number 883, who's now 11 from tying and 12 from surpassing the great one, Wayne Gretzky, all-time NHL history. So let's see how that's going to continue to play out. And I said this on the podcast 2 days ago. I think Ovechkin's going to – he's on pace to beat Gretzky. So why would that let up, barring injury? And, of course, he's pretty much borderline indestructible, as we've seen, despite the fact that he did suffer a broken leg in Utah on November 18th and was out for 5 weeks. But he has not missed a beat since he's come back. He's come off of a hat trick over Edmonton on Sunday, gets a goal there, the only goal in the game, and a loss to Calgary. And for Ovechkin, hey, I'd be shocked if he doesn't get it at this point. So let's see how that's going to play out. But let's see what's going to happen here. Let's see. The novice has a question. So we're going to get you in different markets on the road this year. You mean me? As far as traveling or making appearances, that I would think you have to be just a bit more specific. Listen, I would love to take my show on the road. Oh, my guy James in the house. We'll get to that in a second. Now, if you're talking about me, the novice, listen, I would love to take my show on the road, and I would think eventually I will. Why not? I'm doing this full time. I'm doing this, of course, out of the love, but I'm trying to blaze a trail here, carve a path. All right, I appreciate that. I just wanted to be clear, the novice. And look, I'll just post this here for everybody to see. It's like, yes, you. I'd love to. And because I live in New York City, I have places where I can go locally, where Philadelphia, and I know you have the Eagle logo. So let me ask you, are you from Philadelphia? Let's start there. I would certainly take the ride down, bring all the equipment, maybe find a spot. Now, that's a tricky thing, because just like I've been trying to find a good spot here in New York to host my live stream on Saturday, because if I go to an establishment, I'm going to have to deal with the crowd, which I don't mind that. That, to me, is not a problem. But some of these places, and a lot of these places, they'll have a DJ, they'll have music in their overhead speakers, and I can't have a presence of music filtering into my microphone. It's not as if this is a microphone that, yes, you're going to hear me, but I'm sure you're going to hear the ambiance in the crowd wherever I'm at. And if there's going to be copyrighted music played, I could get shut down. And the last thing I need is to get shut down in the middle of a live stream celebrating the 7th anniversary of a podcast. So, but with that being said, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you asking that. And that would be, yes, I will definitely do that. And if that means I go here to start, whether it's Philadelphia, Boston, D.C., Baltimore, I will do it. Now, I don't know how many people in those regions are familiar with yours truly. And yes, this is where I have to pimp myself, so to speak. And this is why I'm going to do a lot more of these live streams as we move it along, because I intend to do so. Now, I haven't targeted what day of the week. I'm going to unveil that more on the live stream come Saturday. So, yeah, we'll definitely figure it out. Look at this. I love it. And the novice, I guess you just recently found me here on YouTube. So, I appreciate your support. I appreciate everybody's support. And my guy, James, who I'll get to in a minute, he's one of my day ones. And if this is your first time hopping on board, I appreciate you tenfold. Because, like I said, you guys are driving the ship here. I may be navigating it, but you're driving it to the extent where it's like, hey, you're listening to what it is I have to say. The novice is pointing out, get me across the U.S. and also figuring it out. Listen, I need all the help I can get. This is a little engine that could. I've been talking sports since birth. I've been hosting a podcast for almost 7 years. I've been having my channel more consistent for 2 years. I'm not going anywhere, people, as long as I'm alive, breathing, and feeling good. So that's all that matters here. And the novice, I appreciate it. And you say, I know it's, oh, is that right? And you know what? Wait, I have to go back in some of my emails because, of course, I get when you post comments, I'll get them. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I may know, and I don't want to mix the name. I could type it in the chat room, whatever. But unless you announce who you are, then I could say, oh, wait a second. How dare I not even know who you are? But maybe I do know you longer than I think or what have you. And if that's the case, I appreciate it. But all right, Jonathan, I'll get to your comment in a second. Let me get to a comment that was posted here earlier as I scroll through the chat room. And I love the interaction, people, and this is what it's all about. All right, so let's see. All right, let me get to my guy James here, one of my day ones. What do you think the Knicks need to do to get past my Celtics? And yes, I'm a Celtic fan, people. I know people are going to be like, boo, JAYREELZ, come on, seriously? How are you a Celtic fan? I can talk about that if you like. You want to put something in the chat room, say, yeah, how am I a Celtic fan? Not a bandwagon fan. I could go through all of my history as being a Celtic fan. For those who don't know, I tipped off earlier when I said the last time the Mets won a World Series, I was 17 years old. So obviously I've been around. But to answer your question, James, the trade deadline is come and gone. And as I mentioned on the podcast Monday, considering the Knicks coming out of the break, they lost to the Cavaliers badly. And I understand they were coming off a back-to-back because the night before they played the Bulls, and I think they won in overtime. And, they had to travel. Granted, Cleveland is not going to L.A., but for them to lose the way they did and fall flat, I could see them losing whether a close game or let's say even if they lost a game that the Cavaliers went going away late. All right, fine. You can live with that. But they lost badly then and then had a 36-hour turnaround to lose in Boston the way they did. And even though they had a valiant comeback there second half into the fourth quarter, but then when you look at the final score, 118-105, obviously that's not good. I think the Knicks, now they're well coached and their roster, as we all know, is very good. But the one piece I think they're missing another glue guy, but they're missing a championship glue guy. They have OG Anunoby, who's a glue guy. He's going to give you defense. He's going to battle, etc. Mikal Bridges, a guy who could score, is long, gives you defense. And I think they miss Isaiah Hartenstein more than they may want to admit because, listen, I'm not trying to make him out to be Kevin Love or out to be Bill Walton or anybody like that, a guy who could defend, he could pass, and also rebound, scores in the paint, gives you defense. They need a guy like that, and the Knicks don't. And I understand Karl-Anthony Towns, he can provide that from time to time, and they're missing Mitchell Robinson, as we know, but sadly, Mitchell Robinson, you step on his toe, and he's out half the year. And I like Robinson as a player. I understand he also gets into foul trouble as well, but they need a guy, I feel. And I don't want to say he's like the perfect fit, and it's too late now because he's bounced around all over the place, and he won a championship in Milwaukee in 2021. But I think a guy like PJ Tucker, because he brings a lot of grit, he brings an attitude, and he also knows how to win. And I think that's what the Knicks need in order for them to get to that next level. And I understand he's not a sexy choice. I understand that he's not a guy that you could just plug in and automatically he's going to give you 12 to 15 points, 8 to 10 rebounds. But again, you need a guy that's going to give you toughness. He's going to give you grit. And it's not to say the Knicks don't have tough players. But think about this. When you look at last year's team, and I understand they fell apart late with all their injuries. Obviously, they didn't have Julius Randle. OG Anunoby was out with that hammy halfway through the series. They lost Jalen Brunson midway through Game 7. Hart has toughness. Brunson, we know, has toughness. Bridges, we haven't really seen just yet. Karl-Anthony Towns, we haven't seen just yet. Let's call that as we see it. Because as I talked about, even when they acquired Karl-Anthony Towns, he's a guy that we're going to judge and grade on the court in April, May, and June, if they get to June. That's where Karl-Anthony Towns, that's where he's going to really earn his keep here. Because remember, that game against the Celtics a couple of Saturdays ago, and I get it. It was the night before the Super Bowl. It kind of gets lost in the shuffle because of the regular season. Yes, it was on ABC Saturday Showcase. He had 9 points and 9 rebounds against the Celtics. Could you imagine if he did that in a playoff series? And let's just say in a second round, which would be a matchup, if the Celtics and Knicks win their respective first-round matchups, if he had 9 points and 9 rebounds in any of those games, but let's say even in a critical game, let's say it was a game 4 at home where the Celtics had a 2-1 lead, and here's Karl Anthony Towns, and I lost, had 9 points and 9 rebounds. The Knicks fan would never forgive him. So that's where I think the Knicks are missing. They're missing that type of player that is just going to add an element of toughness, of attitude, and to be a guy that is going to elevate the energy, even the crowd at the Garden, because the Garden loves players like that. Do I even need to bring up Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason? Those are the guys that the Knicks fans revere, and they haven't won anything. So to me, that is a guy that I know the Knicks really need in order for them to get ahead and go far. Val B, will the Warriors make the playoffs? Now, this is something I've waffled back and forth right now, and not only that, over the last few weeks. And Val, you're not going to like this, but I got to admit, before the Spurs lost Victor Wembanyama because of that blood clot that he has on his shoulder, I was hoping that the Spurs would get that final spot. Now, Sacramento, I know right now, I believe they're currently 10th. Let me pull up some standings here. And, let me have some fun. Ready for this, people? Yeah, let me really you want to talk about adding an element? Let's add an element to this live stream. All right? Let me see if I can execute this properly. So just bear with me, people, as I pull this up here. All right. Now, I get into my standings. Let's hold up a second. Now we got there? I know. You're going to see a bunch of tabs on the top. So pardon the tabs. But now as I present, let me see if it gives me share screen. 2 monitors. All right. Bear with me 1 second, people. Yeah, let me plug this in because I want to make sure, listen, I don't have anything that's offensive or, how can I say, lascivious, to use a big word there. All right. Let me just pull this up on my screen here because I do have a second screen. All right. Now, if I'm going to judge this fairly here, Val, if you're still with me, and I appreciate it if you are. Let me just pull this tab over. Let me maximize this. I'll just leave it like that. I'm sure you'll be able to see it anyway. Let's go back to here. Boom. I know I'm looking to the left here, or to your right. But here's what happens. I know I probably should have had this proper beforehand. Aha, here we go. Yeah, I got to allow. Yes, I know. All right. Let me know if you can see this. I'm sure you can. Can I get a heads up? Can I get a thumbs up? All right. I'm sure you can see that. Now, here's what we got. Western Conference, as I scroll down, and I know I'm not looking at the camera. I should probably have a camera up here. It's going to come in time, people. Trust me, I'm going to get my game on point when it comes to these live streams. I'm going to be maybe not up there with the Kai Cenats of the world and people like that, but believe you me, hopefully I can be the sports version of Kai Cenat, because if that's the case, trust me, I'll be on and popping at that point. All right, so I don't know if you can see this. I wish I could highlight this a little bit better. Golden State, 31-27. Right now, 8th in the Western Conference, just a half game ahead of Dallas. Now, here's where the Spurs are. Forget about the Spurs there, Toast, obviously with Wembanyama. But a few weeks ago, you had the Spurs just a smidge behind Golden State in the Western Conference for the 10th seed. Now, this is just for the play-in tournament. I wanted the Spurs to get into the postseason because I've seen the Warriors in the play-in. Last year, they lost to the Lakers in the first game at the 9-10 matchup. They were toast. The year before that, they lost back-to-back games in the play-in scenario. No, that was the year before that, because 2 years ago, they went on and played the Kings as the 3-6 matchup, and they beat the Kings. But 2 years before that, they were out, done, toast. So I don't want to see Golden State anymore. Now I get it with the infusion of Jimmy Butler on the team, and now they look to be hitting their stride. They've won 4 in a row, and right now they are at least in the 7-8 window to where they do have a safety net that if they were to lose that game, at least they would play in the second matchup of the 9-10, whomever would have come out of that scenario. So I think the Warriors, I'd have to say right now, they're going to make it to the playoffs, because the Suns, they've been a disaster. And right now they're 3-1, and they look like they are about to be pushed out to sea. And that may be a big theme I'm going to start with tomorrow on the podcast. And I haven't posted any 1-minute shorts on my YouTube channel, which I'll probably do later on. So I'll talk about the Suns a little bit because they've been a massive disappointment. And people can talk about the Sixers all they want. And yes, they've also been a terrible disappointment, but at least they have an excuse. And B's been out of the lineup. They haven't had any cohesion. And I get it. They were supposed to have a big year. I think they're over under number in Vegas. What was that? I got to pull that up because I know, as a matter of fact, I'll pull that up on this main screen here. And the over-unders, I don't know. I'm not a gambler, people, but I have some fun with the over-under win totals. And the Sixers, get ready. They were 52.5. So Las Vegas put them at their over-under 52.5. So if you pick them as an over, they have to win 53 games this year. And how many wins they have at this very moment? 20, and they have 37 losses. So I've already cleared that threshold by at least a couple of weeks. But for the Suns, they just had a just god-awful year. And you have to wonder if there are going to be changes made in the Valley of the Sun. I would think that's going to be the case because there is no way. Let me see if I can shut this down. So let me stop sharing my screen. All right, I'll stop, and then I'll come back and move this screen over here. So, Val, to answer your question, I think the Warriors are going to make the playoffs because of Jimmy Butler, had his addition on top of the Spurs already out to sea. Forget about Portland. I know they're trying to sneak up. And for the Suns, they are right now in danger of really being toast. So I have to say, yes, they're going to make it into the playoffs. Now, Jonathan has a question here. Taro D, I'll give you, thank you very much. I'm just going to give you a shot, Taro D. Thank you. Right next door. I appreciate you for chiming in. But Jonathan has this. Your thoughts on the Dallas Mavericks reportedly having an issue with Luka smoking hookah and drinking beer. I believe that's the reason why the Mavericks did not want to fork over the Supermax of what, $345 million, which I still think is a mistake by them because you're giving up a generational player. And I understand that he has his vices, but the guy still got to an NBA final last year. And the guy is still a top 5 player in the league, hands down, even with him smoking and drinking. Now, we know he's not a great defender. And I don't care what Nico Harrison and the front office, the ownership of the Mavericks, they could say all they want. And they've even mentioned about the culture. They've mentioned about defense winning championships. So they could say, oh, that's not a knock on Luka. That's not trying to say that Luka wasn't part of the culture or wasn't part of the defensive game plan. Nonsense. Read between those lines, people. That was an indirect at Luka. And listen, would you like him cutting down the beer drinking or the diet, whatever it is that he eats, or even smoking hookah? And I'm glad you brought that up, Jonathan, because there was a lot of talk about him maybe smoking, whether it was cigarettes or hookah. And if that's the case, then you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, even a guy that is a top 5 player and an all-NBA player, I might add, you would think that he would take better care of his body. But I think he's fell into the perfect scenario because LeBron, and we know he's an alien. And that's not to say that he's going to start adopting a lot of LeBron's workout regimen or practices, etc. But I would think that maybe he should save the hookah or maybe not drinking a 6-pack. And I don't know what he drinks. And to me, is it my business what he drinks? If I'm a fan of the Mavericks, I would say yes, because that is the difference between winning a championship and not. I mean, when you think about the greats of the game, you think Michael Jordan was drinking beer or Kobe Bryant were drinking beers, let's say in the middle of the finals when he was up 2-0, the famous, the job's not finished. You think he's out there celebrating, oh, yeah, let me pop a bottle, or, yeah, let me get a couple of scotch and sodas. I mean, seriously? So Luka, and I get it, this generation a little bit different from the players of yesteryear. But, yeah, I have to say that the Mavericks definitely had an issue. But, of course, they're not going to come out and say it. And, unfortunately, Nico Harrison, he's going to lose his job at some point because last night notwithstanding, I'm not going to get into the game where Luka, again, he stared at the bench, and I guess Nico Harrison was near the bench, because why would he stare at his former coach and his former teammates? They had nothing to do with this. This was all Nico Harrison. And if I was Nico Harrison, I would have stayed as far as away from the Staples Crypto.com arena. Because again, he's just attracting attention to him because Doncic, after a 3 in the first quarter, was already giving the death stare in the direction. And is that something that you want? Is that the attention that you want to attract for your organization, especially when you have Anthony Davis in street clothes? It's just not a good look. It's not. So to me, and I'm still shocked at this trade. I mean, I cannot believe that was a Saturday night. It went down when the Lakers were in town to play the Knicks, and I still couldn't believe my eyes. And to this day, I can't believe it, because how could you give up a player of that magnitude for a guy? I get it. He plays defense, won a title. He's an all-NBA player. You can't knock Anthony Davis, but the guy has a problem staying healthy. Now, if you're going to trade Luka Doncic for the following: SGA, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, Giannis. And Giannis is older. He's 30 years old. But Giannis is still pretty much at the peak of his powers. If you were going to trade Luka for those guys, I would say, okay, I understand. I get it. But you traded for a guy that's breaking down and has been breaking down. And I understand he played 76 games in a regular season last year. Okay, fine. No problem. But you saw what happened here. He was getting in the lane against the Sixers when he came up lane. Or, excuse me, against the Rockets, because in the game against the Sixers, that's when he originally hurt himself, but he had the adductor strain when Alperen Sengun was going in the lane for a dunk and untouched, and that was toast. And that is the good, bad, and ugly of Anthony Davis in one game. The good is that he returned from that injury that he suffered as a Laker in Philadelphia. And also 26-16, I believe he had 6 assists and 3 blocks. And then the ugly is that he left the game and he hasn't come back since. And, I mean, what more could you say? Now, the novice put up here, oh, okay. I know Celtics, Steelers, and Mets. Yeah, that's me. Now, the novice, I see Eagles. And I'm also thinking your Phillies across the board, considering that you were bringing up the Philadelphia Phillies earlier. So, and value, I appreciate that. Thank you. But that's what we have got going for us here in the comments. I don't know if anybody else has something to say. Let me make sure if I covered everything here. I got that comment from Jonathan. Warriors. Yep, so far I got all that. Lay off too long. Different markets. I don't know. Want to give me different markets. From your lips to God's ears there, the novice. So I appreciate that. But let's see. What else do we have here? Yankee, Lakers, Eagles. That's an interesting mix. Very interesting. But I guess it says the same for me. Mets, Steelers, Celtics. I mean, that's all over the place too. So I can't even talk, I guess, from that perspective. But Yankees, Lakers, Eagles. All right. Novice, how do you feel about the Yankees this year? You want to talk about that? Or even your Lakers for that matter. Maybe we'll stick to basketball. If you want to give me a quick overview of both of your teams. Do you think the Lakers are going to go far, and do you think the Yankees are going to go back to a World Series? You know what? Let me throw that in the mix real quick. If the Yankees don't get back to a World Series this year, there needs to be an investigation. That's right. I said it right now on February 26th, 1:08 p.m. Eastern Time. The overview of the American League right now is the Yankees did the best they could. Well, listen, the Dodgers are just a better team. I mean, that's all you could say. The Dodgers are just better. And Freddie Freeman was ice cold. Game 1, the Grand Slam. What more can you say? And then obviously 3 home runs in the following 3 games after that, MVP, etc. But the Yankees and that American League, it is right now, it's them and everybody else. Let's just look at your own division. The Red Sox, they made improvements to their rotation, and they bring in Alex Bregman. Nice. And do you believe in Aroldis Chapman as your closer over Kenley Jansen, who now is in LA with the Angels? That's dicey, but they're still the class of the AL East. The Orioles did nothing this offseason, and I'm very disappointed with them because I would have thought that after the last 2 years, they won the division 2 years ago. All right, they got as a wild card. This past year, they scored 1 run in the 2 games in the wild card against Detroit, and just gut-wrenching. But nobody's expecting anything big out of the Orioles. Yeah, they'll probably have a big regular season with their young guns, but their rotation, not good. Grayson Rodriguez, can he stay healthy? Obviously, Corbin Burns goes to Arizona. So I'm not a big believer in the O's. Forget about the Rays or even the Jays for that matter. I'm sure a lot of talk is going to be about Vladimir Guerrero. Who knows? He could be a guy that the Blue Jays will try to trade at the deadline. They're not going to get much back considering whomever's going to trade for him is going to be a rental. So that's just your American League East. The Central, we've seen the Yankees beat up on them over the years. I've seen them kill the Guardians time after time in the postseason, as we've seen. I also see about the Royals, who they beat up last year, as we saw. And even if the Tigers come out, I don't want to see the Tigers as well. The Yankees will kill them. And then the Astros are not the Astros anymore, as we've seen there with Bregman gone, with Kyle Tucker gone. And I don't care about Christian Walker being at first base. That team is a shell of its old self. And Framber Valdez is also a guy that is going to be probably dangled at the deadline. And even though Seattle has good pitching, they don't have good hitting. The Angels have not done enough, and Anthony Rendon's on the shelf again. And are you thinking that Texas is going to have a resurgence here to maybe get back to the top of the AL West? I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. So the AL is just the Yankees and everybody else. And if they don't get back to a World Series, I'd be shocked. Now, the novice also says, I think they'll be back. The Dodgers did what they should have done. No, absolutely. They were the favorites, and they won in 5 games. And it's interesting because before the baseball season last year, with them bringing in Ohtani and also with Yamamoto, my running joke was that with those additions and to go along with Tyler Glasnow, it was going to be World Series sweep or bust for the Dodgers. And to think they were that close. They were up 3-0 against the Yankees before the Yankees avoided embarrassment. And we saw what happened in Game 5. So I think my running joke when I do my baseball preview, which will be, 4 weeks from tomorrow, is going to be playoff sweep or bust because of how this team has been constructed. So, yeah, that means they're going to have to sweep the division series. They're going to have to sweep the NLCS and the World Series, because anything short of that would probably be a disappointment. But even if they win a World Series in 7 games and 20 innings, doesn't matter. You win the World Series, you win the World Series. So that's what I have with them. And then my guy, James, what do you think the Giants should do? I wouldn't mind getting Carter. Yeah. Now it's tricky because I know a lot of these rumors here with Matthew Stafford. And listen, if you're the GM, Joe Shane, we get it with Matthew Stafford and what he's done here as the quarterback of the Rams, and Sean McVay, couple that. Even though he's 37 years of age, he's a statue, but he could throw him with the best of them. If I'm the Giants, I certainly wouldn't trade that pick for anything. I mean, unless you're getting Patrick Mahomes, but we understand that's not going to happen. But I think the Giants, and yes, they need help everywhere. And all I could say is that would be a good start if they were to get him, because the Giants, forget about quarterback. Don't draft Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I wouldn't go there because those guys aren't automatics. If you're going to draft a quarterback, you have to draft an automatic. Look at what the Jets did. All you got to do is just look across the hall, for all intents and purposes, at MetLife. They drafted Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson. And Darnold was the number 3 pick overall, and Zach Wilson was the number 2. And both of those guys are nowhere near a Jet roster. Far gone, I might add. So, yes, unless you're getting a Patrick Mahomes or a Dan Marino or a guy that you know is going to be your quarterback for the next decade, you can't draft any of those 2 guys. But I would think, yes. And that would be a safe start because the Giants, I mean, they need everything. They need O-line. They have some decent receivers, but they can't think about their offense right now. They're going to have to do what they can on defense. And I understand Brian Burns is a disappointment, and I get it. They're going to have to do all they can to get themselves back to some sort of respectability, because as we've seen here, the Giants have been, other than a couple of seasons, the one year with Ben McAdoo when they made the postseason in 2025 before losing the Packers, and then they had that shot where they beat the Vikings in the wild card before losing to the Eagles. That was 2 years ago. But if I'm the Giants, now it'll be interesting because if the Cleveland Browns do decide to trade Myles Garrett, and maybe let's say they flip-flop. Not they're going to trade Myles Garrett to the Giants, but let's say if the Giants want the edge rusher Abdul Carter, this is the guy that they're probably going to have to flip-flop with, because as I just pulled up the mock draft here, where Myles Garrett, who has requested a trade, and who knows if he's going to get traded on draft day or maybe even leading up to the draft, because I could see the Browns, although I think they've vehemently denied wanting to trade Garrett, but if they do, I would think they'll try to do it before the draft, and therefore maybe they may have their eyes on Abdul Carter, and this is the edge rusher from Penn State. Then the Giants are going to have to really maybe not pull a rabbit out of their hat, but now they're going to have to flip-flop draft picks if that's the guy that they want, and for them to go all in on him, because they're going to have to give up their pick. They're probably going to have to give up a second-round pick and maybe even a first-round pick next year. And, James, I'm sure you don't want to do that. Now, if they were to give up a 1 and 2 this year for that pick, they probably won't have to give up a 1 next year. But I would think that if they do not want to part with their number 2, which I would believe would be, off the top of my head, ranked 35th? And I don't know. I'd have to go back and check. We would think with the way the draft order is, they'll have a high pick there in the second round. But if they can't do that, or if they won't do that, then they're going to have to give up a number 1 next year. I know some of these mock drafts have Travis Hunter, which would be interesting because you'll have a two-way player. But that's also dangerous because you don't have a quarterback and you don't know how effective he's going to be offensively, even though you have Malik Neighbors, as you know, and you can put in Travis Hunter there as your number 2. But how I look at it is that what is the focal point of wanting to bring in a guy like Travis Hunter to a team that, yes, needs a lot, but unless they have a quarterback, is he really going to be as purposeful offensively as he would defensively? And that's the big thing. And I get it, because he's going to be drafted high, he's going to go to teams that don't really have a quarterback. Because the Browns, let's say if they drafted Travis Hunter, do you believe in Deshaun Watson at this stage if you're a Brown fan? And the Titans need a quarterback, and right now they have Cam Ward going number 1. So it's very dicey. And it is one that if you're a Giant fan, which I know you are, James, it is certainly you would have to go with the edge rusher, because those are guys that don't grow on trees, that are game wreckers. And, of course, you don't have to pay them a ton, at least in that first-year scenario when it comes to contracts go. All right, now, Donavis, what you got here? Dodgers had an amazing team, but the Yankees this year do better. All right, you think the Yankees are going to win the whole thing this year? Is that what you think? Giants should go after Hunter and Stafford and trade. Now, here's the thing. If you go after Stafford, you have to give up your number 1 pick. Chances are. Now, I wouldn't do that. You'd have to keep your pick, because Stafford is an older guy. He wants $50 million on top of that. He's immobile. You're going to have to fortify your offensive line. That's a hefty price if I'm the Giants. I wouldn't do that. Now, if you want to go after Hunter, that's fine. But Stafford, I would pass. And yes, here you go. Hunter's Neighbors, trade for Stafford. Listen, it sounds good, but that means you're not going to have a number 1 pick. That means, because like you said, all right, Hunter, that's if they don't trade their pick. Oh, you're talking about next year's. Now, will the Rams want that? That's the thing. I'm sure the Rams will want the Giants number 1 pick, because this year, and the only reason why I bring that up is because let's say, okay, we'll take next year's number 1 pick, which I don't think they would ever do for this reason. So now they have Stafford and they have Hunter to go along with Neighbors. Let's say the Giants are 7-10. They're going to be middle of the pack. They're probably going to be 9th, 10th, somewhere around there when they draft next year. Where right now you could get your number 3 overall, 4 spots, which is huge in the draft order. So if you ask me, I would think that the Giants, they're going to say, we'll trade you a second. And all right, maybe if the Rams bite on next year's number 1, it's possible. But I would think they'd have to give up a second this year, because they're going to want draft collateral now. How do you think they rebuilt that defense last year or the last couple of years, especially after they won the Super Bowl when they had cap casualties everywhere? They had to trade Jalen Ramsey. They had to let go of some guys. They had to rework contracts. Thankfully for them, they didn't have to re-up on Aaron Donald, who retired. So they were able to draft guys that certainly were surprising, whether it was Yeast, the linebacker, and a couple of the guys that they were able to draft. And they pretty much rebuilt their defense. And I'm sure that they're going to want to get that number 1 pick this year to know that, hey, maybe they could get Abdul Carter, or maybe they could get somebody else that they could certainly use. Maybe a guy on the offensive line if they plan to keep Stafford. So that is something we'll have to wait and see. And for James, Eagles still defense tools. Yeah. I mean, the Eagle defense, think about this. You could actually argue that the Eagle defense in Super Bowl 57 was compromised by the slick field in Arizona because they were unable to get pressure on Matthew Stafford, on Patrick Mahomes. Because remember, they had the issue with the turf. It was slick. They didn't have the extra long cleats to wear. And as if the pass rush, and you could even argue, although it's debatable, I would think that this defense is better than that one, but you could argue Hassan Reddick, who had a big-time year, Javon Hargrave, who had double-digit sack numbers. You had Fletcher Cox, who obviously was a big force there defensively. You could even debate whether or not that Eagle defense was better than this one. Now, of course, you're not going to say that because this one won a Super Bowl where that one did it, but you had the issue with the field that was literally an ice skating rink, and players weren't able to gain traction to really put a significant pass rush on Mahomes down in, down out. So you can actually see whether or not that if they did have that defense, that they actually could have possibly won a Super Bowl. And as it was, they only lost by 3 points. It's not as if they got blown out in the game. But yes, the Eagles definitely showed their defense on a controlled surface. And we saw what they did there against the Chiefs, 2.5 weeks ago. So I agree with you, James. Yeah, Giants do need to get their defense back. And why not? When you think about the Giant defense, you can even go back to the days a million years ago. Sam Huff. I mean, that's going back to the 50s, of course. But we all know LT, Harry Carson, Carl Banks. You want to even go to the days of Brad Van Pelt. I mean, yes, you could even bring him up if you want. All right, Donavis, how many number 1 picks pan out? I mean, that's fair. There are a lot that do not pan out. We could go through a million of them. But the thing is, are the Giants willing to pay that price for Matthew Stafford? Because think about it. He wants $50 million, so you're going to have to trade to get him, give him a number 1 pick in the process, and on top of that, boom. All right, he wants to rework his contract and get paid $50 million a year. 37. And like you said, nobody's giving number 1. There's not. Joe Shane will be fired. And I don't think the Giant ownership, John Mara, is going to say, no, hey. Yes, if it's Patrick Mahomes, if they're trading for Jaden Daniels, if they're trading for Lamar Jackson, I won't say Justin Herbert right now. If you're trading for guys like that, well, without question, you do it in a heartbeat. But Matthew Stafford is not or are not those guys. Yeah, turf was bad in that Super Bowl. Now, it wasn't bad as far as it was muddy or there were divots all over the place. That turf in Arizona, as you know, they have the dome and the turf actually rolls out. Now, they have a semi-dome. It's similar to Cowboys Stadium where it's mostly covered, but then they have the openings in the ceiling. So they have the turf where it rolls out side the stadium. And, of course, they can nurture it. They could get the sun. They could water it, et cetera, and they could roll right back into the stadium. So whatever surface that they put before the Super Bowl, of course, it's 2 weeks or less than that in order for them to really get a good feel or really get a good semblance of how the field is going to take shape. And because they installed new turf, and yeah, it may have been part inside, part outside, but maybe those final couple of days they kept it inside, and therefore it had gotten really slick and certainly not a lot of traction. So therefore the Eagle defense was unable to capitalize and get that pass rush that they were hoping to get on Mahomes there that day. So, yeah. Oh, I got a shout out before I get to the next one. My guy, Nike. He's one of my day ones, too. Much appreciated. Greetings to all. Lord blessings. Thank you so much. Thank you for stopping by. Also, much appreciate your support for the podcast. And for the novice 3 number 2s. Wait, that's details of the podcast. We want to get to the details here of what the novice just said. 3 number 2s. So you're talking about, I don't know what the Giants draft booty is. I don't know if they have 2 number 2s this year or what have you. Now, I don't know. It's tricky. I don't know if the Giants can be willing to do that. Even if it is 3 number 2s or 2 and a 3 or whatever, some combination of picks to send to LA. I don't know. And as I said a couple days ago on my YouTube channel, I do not want him any part of Pittsburgh. And this has no bearing, no offense on Stafford himself. That Steelers offensive line is young. You saw what happened last year with Russell Wilson. And Wilson, as we all know, is a far cry from the scrambler that he was in his heyday in Seattle. So could you imagine Matthew Stafford? Now, I get it. They're still trying to gel. They're still trying to be a solid unit with the likes of Mason McCormick. And their first-round pick was out for most of the year in Troy Faltanu. And when you want to also throw in Dan Moore and throw in the likes of guys like that, yes, it could be a situation where if they're healthy, steady, they could turn out to be a very good offensive line, but still, they haven't had a lot of reps together. They haven't not been that type of unit where you could totally rely and truthfully bank on them being that wall for a guy like Stafford who's just going to play catch and pitch. If he's going to have to scramble, if he's going to have to get out of the pocket, that's where you have to avert your eyes. And I'm not willing to go there if I'm a Steelers fan. So, yeah, the Steelers started Wilson and Fields. 3 number 2 is a deal. Now, they started Wilson and Fields because they got a break on both fronts where Wilson was pretty much the Steelers' treasure to the Broncos' trash because Sean Payton didn't want him anymore. And even though he had a decent year with the Broncos, not this past year, the year before, but certainly didn't fit the game plan for Sean Payton and what he wanted to do there out in Denver. So when he got cut and became a cap casualty and dead money and all that, $1.2 million was the Steelers, the contract that was signed because of what happened there in Denver. So they didn't have to give him a boatload of money. Even if they had to give him $10 million, I don't even think the Steelers would have gone there. But because he played for the league minimum, for the veteran minimum, knowing that the Broncos were on the hook for 37.5 or 37.8, whatever it was, amount of dollars to pay him for 2024, it was a no-brainer. And it was one I was certainly fine with. And with Justin Fields, because he had fallen out of favor there in Chicago, and Chicago had a number 1 pick, and they had their sights set on Caleb Williams. So therefore, what did the Steelers give up to get Justin Fields? Not a 1, not a 2, not a 3, not a 5, a 6th-round pick. So, of course, I would have done that with my eyes closed and my hands tied behind my back. And Fields played okay. Fields, I'll be honest, if I had to give him a fair rating last year, Fields was a B, a solid B. Now, people can say, oh, Chuck, please, JAYREELZ, I'm falling out of my chair right now. Oh, is that supposed to be good? Well, how did his career go in Chicago? He had flashes, he had glimpses, he had moments, but his record in Chicago was awful. What was he, 10-28 or 11-28, whatever his career record was? And I get it. He didn't have a lot of weapons there, and the system was all screwed up with Matt Eberflus as his coach. All right, fine, understood. But here in Pittsburgh, he did win 4 out of 6 games. And the one game that he actually should have won, let's face it, was the Cowboy game. Because remember, they were down 14-10 in the game. Wait, let me make sure I got this proper. No, they were down, I want to say, was it 14-10? No, they were down 13-10 in the game. And Justin Fields drove down the field. A lot of runs, but he did a few passes, and they punched it into the end zone. And they made it 17-13 with about 4.5 minutes to go on a Sunday night game against Dallas, if you recall. And then what happened? The defense, who week 5, Sunday night, NBC, was still relatively healthy, good. And we know the cast of characters are. I don't need to bring up the TJ Watt, et cetera, Cam Haywards. But their defense, 4th and goal, to ice the game and for the Steelers to be victorious. And at that point, they would have been 4-1 as they lost the week before in Indianapolis. What happens? They gave up a touchdown pass in the final seconds of the game, and they lost. So Justin Fields could have been 5-1. So he actually did a very good job as quarterback. And the game against Indianapolis wasn't all on him. A lot of 3-and-outs, capitalized. Anthony Richardson was out. Joe Flacco came in. He put points on the board. And even though they were down 17-0, they did have a valiant comeback, but they ended up losing. I think the final was 34-24. Or maybe it was 31-24, whatever it was. So he did not play bad. So I'm not going to vilify either Wilson or Fields or the Steeler front office to bring those two guys in because they came in on the cheap. But now they don't have a quarterback. I don't want Aaron Rodgers. Forget about that. I don't want Matthew Stafford. Forget about that. If you ask me who I want as of right this very moment, I'd say bring back Justin Fields. Bring him back. He's not going to cost you a ton. You could probably get him. I would say, yeah, he's not getting 40, 50 million. That you know. But I would think he would garner a contract similar to what Geno Smith got, and that's still a lot. Geno Smith, what did he get? A 3-year, $105 million deal from the Seahawks? If not before last year, the year before that. Because, again, the market is what the market is. He's not going to get a 3-year, $30 million deal, people. I mean, you can forget about that. He's probably going to get a deal somewhere in the vicinity of $80 to $100 million. Whether that's 3 years, $80 million, and they give him whatever, $35 million guaranteed, or dare I say, maybe he gets $300-400. Who knows? And yes, people could say that's a lot. JAYREELZ, you're off your rocker. You're crazy. But guess what? They're paying Trevor Lawrence $55 million a year. They're paying Justin Herbert $52 million. And I understand Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert right now, you have to say, are better than Justin Fields, but it's not as if they're light years ahead of Justin Fields. It's not as if they're guys that are automatics as far as them. Yes, are they quarterbacks of their own franchises? Of course. But what have they done in the first few years as far as quarterback? Justin Herbert's 0-2 in the postseason. Trevor Lawrence, although beat Justin Herbert when they were up 27-0 and played well in Kansas City during a divisional loss that same year. But since then, what has he done? Squat. Nothing. And all I have to say is Justin Fields is not that far behind from those guys. So call it what you want, but I would take, no Rodgers. You got that right, Nike, 100%. And one more, two, and another. So you mean to tell me, Novice, you want re-sign Russell Wilson again for 1.2 and a number 4 for Fields? I don't know. I'm mixed up there what you said. But I would bring Fields back. And whomever your backup is going to be, I'm sure you can find somebody off the scrap heap. Somebody that, who knows? Is Gardner Minshew still a Raider? I think he signed a 2-year deal. Fields 3 for $70 would be a deal. You know what? I said 80. And you know what? 3 for $70? Listen, I understand he may thumb his nose at that. But if he likes Coach Tomlin and he likes the culture there, whatever, maybe he does take that. But he is your starter. You can't have another Fields-Wilson scenario. You can't have that. I wouldn't want that because it's unfair to Fields. And we get it that Wilson came on the cheap, and we know about his resume and his pedigree. You knew he was going to get a shot at some point. And listen, Wilson had his moments. He did. But as you got deeper into the season, and especially what we saw there in the latter part of that year, he did not play well. And we saw what happened there in the playoffs. Now, it was not all on him. To me, the defense killed the Steelers in that wild card game against the Ravens. And I understand the offense didn't help. They only put up 60 yards in the first half. But when you give up 300 yards in the first half as a defense, and you're supposed to be this, maybe not top rank, but based on reputation and based on personnel, a team that should have been a top ranked team, and you have 300 yards. Bad memories. Bad memories indeed. And let me see, what did Nike say? Oh, Mike Vick. I will say this. That is, I'll give you that, Nike. That's a good one. Because now I thought Vick was better. But here's the thing. Vick has a better touch on his ball than Fields does. But they both have very strong arms. Fields has a very strong arm. And at times, he even marvels you with your arm. Because I've seen him throw some passes, even dating back to his days with the Bears, but he threw some passes that were kind of like, holy crap, I can't believe I even saw that. Because when you think of Fields, you just think of him being an erratic thrower, a guy that, yeah, he does have a strong arm, but he just sails throws or underthrows his passes or anything like that. But I'd seen him make some throws there, which were, wow, mind-boggling. Like deep outs, which is obviously the toughest throw for any quarterback, and even threading the needle, for that matter, on touchdown throws that he had earlier this year. The one that comes to mind was that game against the Chargers in week 3, where he threw it to, who was it? Not Van Jefferson. Of course, I'm not in Steeler mode right now. Caught the pass, ran. It wasn't Scotty Miller. It wasn't George Pickens. Oh, my L come to me. But he had shown flashes of a very strong and good arm. But the thing is, he doesn't have the touch. And that's what Michael Vick had. And Vick also had a very strong arm, super elusive. And yeah, you could see him being like you said, poor man's Michael Vick. But yeah, I thought he was better. And the novice has here, Vick won games, Fields hasn't been. Yeah, he hasn't. Vick hasn't had Fields hasn't had the body of work, despite the fact that he, I believe, was what, before he came to Pittsburgh, was 11-28 or whatever the record was. But I think Fields, in the right system, and I think in Pittsburgh he does have the right system from this regard. They don't want their quarterbacks throwing 30, 35, 40 passes a game. And they want to rely more on their running game. And it's going to be interesting because Najee Harris is a free agent. So I don't know if he's going to come back. And I would think if I'm him, probably not. But you don't want to have a guy listen, the days of Ben Roethlisberger, obviously long gone, where he could throw 30, 35, 40 times and win a game. You don't want to do that with Justin Fields. As it is, the Ravens don't do that with Lamar Jackson. They rather keep him to 22 to 25 passes a game. Because anything over than that, that means you're trailing, or anything over that means you got to take more chances. And you go away from your game plan, where we know the Ravens, they want to play more of a ground game, eat up clock, move the change. You got the biggest weapon of all at quarterback with Jackson. And then that's how you go ahead and get first downs, get in the end zone, and put up big numbers offensively as they did. The trouble about that is that you're trailing in games, or you don't have the capability to come back because you're always playing from in front. That's the danger. So for a guy like Justin Fields, who hasn't been there yet, and for Steeler offense, who is still trying to find their way since the days of Ben Roethlisberger, they want a guy that's going to throw no more than 25 passes a game and determine the game on the line of scrimmage by the run game, and also rely on your defense more than anything else. And that's the Steelers in a big time nutshell. All right, people, I want you to hang for a second, because I came here maybe as prepared, or maybe even as ill prepared, because one thing I forgot to get was some water. So I'm going to pause this just for a good 60, 90 seconds. I'm going to go to 2 o'clock because your boy hasn't even eaten it yet. I do this cardio fasting. I haven't even done cardio yet, but in preparation for this live stream, I do want to take a bit of a pause just to get some water and get myself refreshed. And then I'll crank out these final 20 minutes with you guys, and also rehash on what we spoke here at the top, which is obviously this, knowing that we have a live stream Saturday, March 1st, the 7th anniversary of the podcast, which actually fell on this day. I posted my first podcast on that date in 2018. So obviously I want to talk about that, the journey, etc. And one more time, I'm still looking for a venue or for a good place to host. So I'm in the middle of doing that. And I am more likely, the likelihood of me having another live stream just to kind of put this out there, and I'll post it all on my socials, the exact time and the exact place, etc., as to where I'll be hosting this live stream. So that is one big news item that you certainly want to stay tuned to. So with that being said, let me shut up and go ahead and take a break here. So I'm just going to put up a quick banner. I don't know if I'm going to even have music for that matter. So stand by as I take a little bit of a break, but I'll be back in about 90 seconds. So I appreciate your patience. Stay tuned as we hang out for a second. Cheers. I needed this in the worst way. So one more. All right. So what else you want to crank up for 20 minutes? In fact, let me get to James real quick. Thank you, Nike. I appreciate it. James, I don't know if you're still in the room or not, but it does have music. All right. Yeah, that little countdown. I got to do my own custom-made one. Let's say if I want to do like a 2-minute breakdown or 2-minute break. James, if you're here, just give me a quick shout, because I know this is the first live stream I've done here through YouTube. And funny enough, I've done live streams in the past on Instagram, but crazy as it may sound, I did more live streams talking about life. And not to say I'm going to start that right now, but then sports. So I kind of love that we're having this bit of a banter here, going back and forth about sports. And with that being said, whatever else you want to talk about here over the final 20 minutes is certainly on you. In fact, let me see. Has anything popped up here over the last hour and a half that I could discuss, that I could? Bad report card. Woody gets F from Jet players. Whoa. Is that right? Now, listen, Woody has admitted that he has not been a good owner. Oh, this is from Jet players and NFLPA survey. Interesting. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just a disaster. There isn't any way, shape, form to cut it. Now, listen, I'll give you a little bit of whatchamacallit. Instead of giving you a 1-minute sermon on, like you see on my channels, my 1-minute short. Yeah, that's no surprise. And like I said, whatchamacallit, Woody Johnson has even admitted that he has not been good. He has to be a little bit more present. Remember, for part of his, not more recent, but when the current administration was back in 2016, 2017, when he left to go to be the, what was it? I guess I'm trying to think of the right word. Not commissioner. Oh, geez, can't think of it. When it was also part of London, ambassador. There's the word. Obviously, he was away from the team. He gave the reins and the helm to his brother, Chris. And obviously, without being part of the team, that's going to hurt when you don't have the figurehead there, despite Chris Johnson trying to do a yeoman's-like job. But all I could say is that the Jets, they got a lot of work to do. And, yeah, what do they do at quarterback? And I know Aaron Glenn, he came out yesterday. A lot of the players weren't happy with his, I don't want to say firing, but him thinking that it was time for Aaron Rodgers to be gone. But you know what? I can't kill him on that. And maybe with Rodgers there, they give him a little more credibility and maybe some early season success. That's not a guarantee, but I think they just wanted to clean the slate and start over. And even if that means some growing pains with a new quarterback, whether they draft one or not, and having to go through the rigors of a couple of long seasons, whether it's 4-13, 5-12, etc. I think they were willing to do that as opposed to having Rodgers. And listen, they laid the groundwork, as you saw, by saying you have to be here for OTAs, you have to be here for every meeting, you have to be on top of everything that we say. And I don't know if Rodgers was willing to do that. So they made their bed. Now they have to lie in it with bringing in a rookie or drafting a guy or somebody as a stopgap. Who knows? But I think they did the right thing. And I understand it may be in the minority when it comes to that, but I would have done the same thing. Now, let's see. What is this? The novice, not the shots I'm used to you taking. I don't know. I didn't get that. Not the shots. Oh, me taking shots at people, you mean? And listen, I don't do this intently. I just got to call like I see it. And one of the reasons why I love doing what I do is because not only do I want to be objective, but I want to be credible. I'm a Steeler fan. I'm not going to break out the pom-poms for my team and think that everything is coconuts and palm trees. That, the Steelers had a bad break. They played the Ravens. And the defense wasn't good. But no, I destroyed. And I actually did a live stream on that where I just undressed the Steelers defense, including Minka Fitzpatrick. And not to go down that road again, but yeah, I got to call it like I see it. So if it's my team, if it's not my team, if it's teams that I can't stand, I'm going to be all over them. But yeah, the whole point of doing what I do is not for clickbait titles. It's not for clickbait material. It's not for, oh, look at me, look what I'm doing, to be the loudest guy in the room or to be the one that's just going to be over the top to say whatever, whenever. I'm not going to do that. And one of the things, and here, I'm going to bring up a name here. I'm going to type this in the room just for you guys, just to have a little fun, just to at least type one thing. And I know this game, you're going to look at this name and be like, who is this guy? Is he an owner? As I just hit send. If anybody knows that name, give me a hands up. All right. And I'm sure you're going to be like, JAYREELZ, what are you doing here? All right. I typed that name in there. And when we're done here, as I said, I'll be here for the next 14 minutes. He's a guy that has a channel on YouTube. And what he does is he's a former real estate agent. And sometimes I find these channels, and I love YouTube. I don't watch TV. I watch a handful of shows. I mean, other than sports and games, of course, as you know, but I watch a lot of YouTube. And there are some influencers. There are some people who have channels who are no names, or some may be popular because they do have a big following, whether it's hundreds of thousands of followers or even millions of followers. But he's a guy that made his chops in real estate and now critiques homes, but luxury homes. And he's a guy that pulls no punches. And he wouldn't be as credible or even as entertaining if he just said, I like this. Or, I'm not crazy about that. Now, right. Is he going to come out and like literally kill it? Be like this? And he has when it comes to design and certain elements of homes and things of that nature. But right. You have to have that and be fair in reference to critiquing, whether it's a game, critiquing a play, critiquing a player. You have to do that. Because if I come out here and just kind of give you a ho-hum or just a simple analysis of the game or of what a particular player did, why even bother? I don't want to bore you to tears. I want you guys and gals to keep coming back. I don't want this to be a thing where it's like, all right, well, hey, the Eagles beat Chiefs in the Super Bowl and, kudos to the Eagles. They had their number. Any given Sunday, what? You're going to next? And listen, I'm not going to come out here standing on my chair yelling off the top of my head. I'm not going to do that either. But you're just going to get that unbridled passion. You're just going to get that feeling that you get through your speakers or earbuds or whatever how you listen to this. And yeah, you're going to feel it because I've been watching sports my whole life, and you're going to get, despite the fact that I'm doing this and I have a platform and I appreciate you guys so much to come on, but I'm going to have it with some passion, but real passion. This isn't, I'm not throwing barbs here, but what the hell? This isn't going to be Stephen A, slamming my fist on the table or getting at the top of my lungs and pointing the finger. And I'm not going to do that. And listen, we understand he's a personality. And yes, I guess in this realm, I'm trying to get to that point, but I'm going to do it with not just with the passion and fire, energy, etc., but I'm going to be real about it. I'm not going to manufacture just to manufacture it. So that's like me coming on and say, hey, JAYREELZ, talk to me about, I don't know, the UFC. What's the next UFC? Probably in the 320s right now. I could talk about it, and I may not even know the fighters, but I'm not going to come out and say, oh, my God, you cannot in any way, shape, form, or fashion take Israel Adesanya in another MMA bout because he's lost 4 of his last 5. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I may say, well, yeah, he's lost 4 of his last 5, and you got to wonder whether or not he's on the downside, considering that he has not been good. And yes, a lot of people know who he is. And he's a warrior. He's a fighter. He's this, etc. But yeah, I'm going to call it as I see it. But in that regard, not everything has to be ratcheted up to the point where you got to tone down the volume on your phone, tablet, laptop, TV, whatever it may be. So yeah, that's all there is to it when it comes to that. Oh, drinking shots. Ginger didn't serve those shots. All right. Well, not the shots I'm used to chasing. All right. Well, let me put that up there for you, the novice. Now, listen. Every once in a while, you have a good time. You have fun. Now, as I'm getting older, listen, by any means, I am not a drinker. I never claimed to be one. Never have. Never will. But, I'll go out, have a good time. I'll have some fun. I'm not going to get crazy, people. I'm 55 years of age, So to me, that's a young man's game. Hanging out 2, 3, 4 in the morning. No. Those days are long in my rearview mirror, and that's fine. And that's my life. And so be it. Ginger didn't serve those shots. I like to take ginger shots, if you ask me. First thing in the morning. Didn't get the name. Yeah, I don't know. Did it just go over my head, the novice? Did I not latch on? If anything, that's my bad and my apologies. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm lost here. Maybe you have to really spell it out for me in order for me to be like, okay, I got it. Who knows? Maybe my brain's on overdrive. Maybe I need something to eat. Who knows? But no, that's funny there. But yeah, ginger shot, I think that's maybe what I need right now. Because even though I have energy, I feel good, even though I haven't eaten. But, when I'm out this 2 hours, and listen, I could go 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. And again, with the live stream there, I want to go 7. I want to go 12, 2, 7. But you know what? Let me ask a question here for the few that are on. I'll pull it up. I was going to save it for Saturday, but I'll save it now. And one thing I didn't mention, and if for those who are watching the replay, if you got to this point, leave me a comment. I should have said that from the top. Whatever comment you want to leave, I'd appreciate. So let me put that out there, even though we're an hour and 50 in. But here's the question I have for you, and I'm going to repost this there on Saturday. But now, I mentioned earlier I did I did weekly live streams on Instagram, different platform, and here I'm trying to elevate as much as I can when it comes to YouTube. Now, is that a yes or no? Do you want to see weekly live streams? Doing what we're doing now. Talking sports, talking about whatever it is that's on our mind, interacting with you guys, as well as, posting up your comments or questions on the screen. That's how I want it to be. That's how these live streams, and on Instagram is a little bit different because I didn't have this particular layout to where I could share my screen, I could post your comments, I could do all that and make it fun and add a little wrinkle to where we can really go into sharing what it is that you have. I got you. I'm going to get to that. Yeah, James, thank you, my man. I guess the answer, I got your answer loud and clear. I appreciate that. And then the Eagles are the best. Everybody will suck. Well, listen, you could say that for this year. I mean, there's no argument to that. Although I will say, let me get to what I was going to say after that, because, yeah, I got to talk about this particular one play that the Eagles run to the hilt that I'm sick of, and I hope they ban it. But the weekly live streams, because of the way I have this shaped up, that chances are I want to do more of these, and I will, and I'll confirm that there on Saturday, but it's just a time frame. I use 12 o'clock because, listen, this is what I do. This is full time. But I know a lot of people are working, or a lot of people are in and out, or a lot of people can't really jump on board. And that in its own right, and I get it, with the big time streamers or people who do live streams, they'll do it at night. They'll do it late afternoon or into the evening. And I've been doing more research about it. So I know it may be a little bit tough for me to do it in the evening because, again, it's not as if I had my own office. It's not as if I had my own area where I could just close the door, separate myself from the wife and my 2-year-old puppy, who thankfully, give her a shout out. Shout out to Kismet, who has been very good and has behaved. No barking, no trying to get my attention while I'm doing this and executing this in a live stream. But I will say that the future does look bright for me to do this, but it's just a matter of doing a time frame. And again, knowing that I get the green light from James, I would think, like, hey, my guy Nike, thank you. And then the novice, what he got here, I know you know sports. I've known you a long time. I know you love sports. I know. And you know what? I got to do my research on you, the novice. And if I haven't picked up on now, it's a terrible job on my part. And I apologize if that's the case. And you know what? Where's my phone? It's actually on the table over there. I didn't bring it. But that is a bad job on my part. I should know. Eagles. Who are the Eagle fans I know in my life? Eagles. Once I hang up, I'll do some research and I'll find, and I'll probably shoot you an email or I'll find you. I'll just do that. But here's one of the, I guess this may be the best way to close out. And this will be a couple minutes before I sign off, say goodbye. The tush push. I know the Packers came out yesterday, their GM, and said that, yes, it's a play that shouldn't be a part of the NFL. Now, I agree with him because it looks more like a rugby scum. And this is the reason why they need to ban it. It is more advantageous for the team that's on the offense than the defense. And before he said, well, JAYREELZ, hold up. You don't know what you're talking about. The defense could do the same thing. They could stack the line, which we've seen time after time, and they could also try to stonewall the offensive line or the push of the Eagles in order for them to either get the first down or the touchdown. No, that is inaccurate. And the reason why I say that is, think about this. You're going to have the quarterback followed by a tight end and a running back behind him, pushing. And we all know that the Eagle offensive line is one of the best, if not the best, in football. So you're going to get guys that are going to push the quarterback into the pile where the pile's already moving forward. And it's not as if the defense has their own tush push. So it's not as if you have the safeties pushing the linebackers to push the linemen to thwart the offense from trying to get that first down or touchdown. And if you were to do that, you would have God knows how many knees, shoulders, ankles that are just going to go in different directions in that pile. Think about that. The offense of the Eagles, they have a head start because they have Hurts going into the pile with the two guys pushing Hurts, everybody going forward, where you just had the defensive line and maybe a linebacker or two because of the way that's structured. To me, you have to have, forget about having let's say you have 7 across and then you have the safeties, the secondary to back them up. You're going to have literally the 4 defensive linemen, or let's say you get 5, you're going to have 5, and then that 5 to push. I mean, it's just impossible. That's why they got to say goodbye to the tush push. And I understand that. Hold on. Oh my God. Now I know who this is. Now I know what this is. And if this, and just to confirm, is today your birthday? If that's the case, how do you like those apples? Because now I've turned the tables before I sign off. If that's the case, then I know who I'm talking to. And if not, I apologize. But because now the dots are being connected, and Eagles, and I know you're a huge Eagle fan, and of course I'm not shouting your name out to protect your identity. So if anything, now I know who Ginger is, and now Sunday shots, and yes, Ginger didn't serve those shots. And listen, I've connected those dots, and I think I know who I'm talking about. All you got to do is just put a quick yes in the next 2 minutes. If not, I'll shout you out, and I'll make sure to follow up with you once I settle down, eat, and get my rest of my afternoon going. So let's push out. I'll talk more about that on tomorrow's podcast. Don't forget that before I sign off. Of course, here on the YouTube channel, If you are an audiophile, if you're more inclined to listen, earbuds, headphones or speakers, of course, Apple, Spotify, please leave a comment, review, like, subscribe, more importantly. And if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please, I implore you to do so. Slowly but surely going up that mountain. I'm what now? I believe, I haven't checked since we started. I'm 22 away from 600. I'm trying to get to 1,000 because I want to start monetizing on this platform, as you know. And listen, I'm not going anywhere. I've been doing this podcast almost 7 years. I've been doing it via video well over a year. In fact, my first ever one. No, I'm going to kidnap you soon. Oh, no. All right. You have every right to do that if that's the case. All right. I'm gonna look you up, the novice, because I got to go back to my old emails. So my apologies. But I know Ginger. I know Sunday Shots. I know we're talking about Havana. Shouting them out. Shout out to Havana Cafe back in the day. But the novice, I appreciate your time. And I got to find you. And I got to find out what's up and so on and so forth. So with that being said, I know I have a little bit over a minute. Not that this is going to time out. But one more time. Podcast tomorrow. Apple, Spotify, probably around 12 noon, 1 o'clock. I'll have it released, talking about the latest and greatest in the world of sports. Again, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I would sincerely appreciate that. Again, trying to get to 1,000. I got to get to 600 first, or last I checked, 578. So I got to get to 579 before I get to 80 and 600 and beyond. So please, this is what I'm doing. This is my bread and butter. And I haven't generated income over this. I'm blessed. I'm grateful, but I want to start generating some money. And I do have a couple of links that I'll post, and I have posted in previous podcasts, whether it's Olipop Soda, whether it's BetterHelp, and they will also be a factor in these live streams moving forward. I just got to get some more approval on that. But with that being said, it goes beyond anything I could ever imagine, anything I ever come up with. Yes, I've known. Hey, listen, that is a long time. If we're going back to the days of Ginger and her giving us shots, that is right now off the top of my head, 12, 13, 14 years. So, yes, maybe even 13, 14 years. We're talking 2011, 2012. So, yes, we do go way back. But with that being said, people, for those who hopped on board, I appreciate you all. And, of course, Saturday, do not forget, one last time, I'll probably put up another post or another live stream. Keep in tune to my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. On Instagram, I'm at JAYREELZ and the JAYREELZ Podcast. So do both. TikTok, the JAYREELZ Podcast. Twitter, I post on Twitter, but mostly about the podcast. But definitely. Or here on YouTube. I'll post an update here on my YouTube feed, on my shorts, Friday, whether or not I'm going to have a live stream, or at least to tell you the time frame, because, yeah, I do not want you to miss out. I'm going to have guests. I'll have 2 guests that are confirmed. Maybe a third will hop on board. I'll also have some giveaways. So you definitely don't want to miss that. So please, I know Saturday's a tough day. You're out and about. It's going to be nice in the Northeast. But again, you could take me on your phone, tablet, wherever you may be. You know that I'm mobile. And right here on YouTube, everybody has YouTube. Please share with your family, friends, foes, friend me. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. Because as I close out every podcast, and I'll close out this live stream in the only way I know, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA, as I like to say. Talking sports is birth. Sharing my passion, fire, fury, energy with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast and live stream. And in this particular case, is coming at you live, correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South End, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace and God bless everybody. Like I said, stay tuned to that dial to find out when the live stream on Saturday is going to come at you. I'd appreciate it, people. And of course, until next time, or until that time, on the flip, baby.